6-month time frame that can then be presented to the board. And with that, I would pass it on to our two board representatives for their comments, which was Vice President Lauliotis and Director Harris. And I'm happy to answer any questions, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Good overview. Just from my perspective, some of the things I really took away from this, and I really appreciate everyone's participation on this task force from other agencies and Director Harris as well as staff. It was a really rich discussion, and it, this is a big project. I mean, this is as big as you want it to be, or and I think we all realize that we really needed to start talking realistically about what we're trying to accomplish here. I think staff did a good job of really trying to understand, trying to help the task force understand, what is undergrounding electric power lines and wildfire mitigation. What does that really mean? And what are we trying to achieve? Because it's sort of the soup du jour, right? Everyone's talking about PG&Es causing all these fires, and it's going to happen here. And I think it was a good discussion, and Sana did a really good job of really pointing out, we build our infrastructure differently based on our specific environmental and climate issues up here, and we have more resilient infrastructure. And so, I think it was also helpful to have the discussion about, other programs we're doing to educate the task force and just bring out this initial discussion about what are the other things we're doing for wildfire mitigation that relates to our overhead lines. And there was a good discussion on the reclosers, a good discussion on the tree trimming program and the enhancement and the expansion of the tree trimming program. And so I think there was a kind of a genuine understanding that, and it got kicked off by Bill Celine, who really started kind of throwing in, a discussion about public safety and their ability to do their jobs and in light of some of the challenges that some of these overhead power lines can create if they're down, poles across the road, if wires are in the streets or in the snowbanks, and then reliability for customers who have health needs that revolve around electric service. So it was a good eye-opening discussion, and it really kind of drew, I would say it drew away from wildfire, but I think we quickly realized that there's a lot more to this than just wildfire mitigation and preventing forest fires from starting. There's a lot more to undergrounding. And we also had a discussion about the town and, some of the Envision DPR projects with the undergrounding. And, my comment in that was, not just aesthetics, but mobility. The sidewalks, the bike paths, bike trails, all these things that crosswalks, all these things that Envision DPR is trying to improve for public mobility and public safety, are impacted by overhead utilities, power poles, et cetera. And so, I believe there's also a significant benefit in some of these commercial core projects where we're trying to improve pedestrian and bicycle mobility as well as vehicle mobility, that working together as partners in some of these projects to improve those aspects by perhaps undergrounding or moving our infrastructure is valuable as well.
Thank you.
Director Harris, do you have additional comments? Please build on Tony's too and your own.
Yeah, no, Tony did a very good job of kind of summing it up. The undergrounding overhead power lines is basically a solution to things. And so it was nice to be able to kind of step back and really see what are we looking at. And we looked at some pros and cons that Tony had mentioned. Dan brought up CPUC. There's an undergrounding Rule 20 programs. So that was something that, is important to read up on. But hearing that undergrounding utilities, it may solve some problems, but it may create other ones. But you don't throw out all these ideas at all just because of the price tag. There are benefits to having undergrounding happen. And I know with aesthetics, like, Dan Wilkins had brought up the downtown area. And, obviously there you do want to have the Jewel of the Sierra in Truckee, and with undergrounding lines there, which they've done, that's always a pro. And that's where partnerships can happen with communities. So having that happen. But it's, just trying to identify the priorities areas where maybe something like that would happen, that we could have partners, that the price tag would be, worth it. So it was good. I thought Tony did a good job of kind of summing up everything.
Great. Vice President Laliotis and Director Harris, are there things that you would really like to have input from your colleagues about, or just their observations?
From the board or from
the board? From the board tonight. This is a board workshop.
Absolutely.
So you're just wondering what specifically. Maybe President Finn, we can just start with observations from the summary that Stephen gave, and then Vice President Laliotis's and Director Harris's comments.
Happy to. My first impression is how there are a lot of similarities, I think, in how each of our initiative groups unfolded, particularly around definitions of what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to accomplish it. When you really dig down into the initiative, for example, public safety, how much public safety is really gained by us undergrounding our power lines. That may not be as important as we thought it would, because we have such a great system, so well hardened, but that may be offset again by Mr. Wilkins and Chief Celine's inputs about how even a small disruption can really affect our emergency services. So it may not necessarily be wildfire in specific, which is what we're all worried about, and the fear that has been a real lever towards us talking about this initiative, but how many other things it affects, and how we can really have a lot of our goals are the same goals that the fire district has and the town has. So in those areas of mutual benefit is where we're gonna be able to have rich opportunity for collaboration. It's not just the PUD undergrounding our power lines. It's going to take support from these other districts and from the community at large. And I think these groups really help us to understand more holistically these initiatives that we've come up with and I think in a really gratifying way. We came up with this because they're PUD, obviously, these are things that are on our minds and on our forefronts. But when we really engage with other districts and community members, I think it's very helpful for us to see what they see and how they're interpreting these. So I think these conversations and really identifying why we want to pursue these initiatives, like in a realistic and detailed way, is incredibly important. And the definitions, like what is the scope? There's a lot of layers in that, and I think that was I imagine that was true in the broadband, and since I was present in the other two, you'll have a chance to talk about that then. But thank you for reporting out on it. It sounds like this was a really productive conversation, that really richened the dialogue. Enriched. I don't think richened is a word. Thank you.
Director Bender.
Find my button there for the mute. So yeah, I'd like to just build on Krista's thoughts, same adjectives here, and thank you everyone for participating, Director Harris, VP Laliotis. My just kind of nice feeling that I got was there's some partners and stakeholders who have, real keen interests in, undergrounding and kind of what I was getting a feel from your reporting out. So it's nice to hear that, hey, there's some other agencies in town that have a real genuine interest in improving it and just beyond the wildfire. The emergency response, there's a lot of lessons learned from the crisis we're in regarding COVID, and that just builds on it. So there's a lot of overlap with these with our big items here that we're building into the strategic plan. So it's really nice to see the overlap. It's awesome to see the collaboration, and you can kind of you're feeling the rubber meeting the road here, and it's exciting. So thank you.
Director Aguero, what do you think of the collaboration of seeing all these names of people that sitting down together and talking about this important topic?
Well, I'm really glad to see that we've gotten this far on this undergrounding thing. There's been a lot of work done as far when we first started to now. And these other two meetings, I think that it's going to take us to a place where it'll start showing the financing, and that's where we just started, and I think we've got a good bite on it with this information that Steve gave us tonight. And I know what the importance is about the undergrounding. That's a Cadillac thing. It's at the top of the line. Everybody wishes to have that thing. It's great, but we can't just jump in it, but we've already have jumped in it, and we're quite a bit along, I think. And so it'd be interesting now on the April 6th meeting, what that's going to produce. And I'm sure it's just going to take us that much more. And it's done a good job right now. Thank you.
Other comments from any board members that you're interested in? VP, I'm going to use that, Jeff Laliotis, and Director Harris take back to this task force, as well as Stephen. Any other things or input, discussion you'd like to have?
Yeah, I had one thought, the thoughts of yes, this is a lot of money. It's a big project, but big things are possible as long as you keep thinking about them and talking and planning and for the benefit of all. So just one last plug.
And I'm going to echo kind of exactly that. It's a big project, but I also imagine that, you can start with small pieces of it, identifying areas that are ripe for undergrounding or more important or have, for whatever reasons, and really, build on these communication opportunities. We've started communicating in a much more fruitful way with other districts. I really have not seen this before. So these initiatives have given our staff real opportunity to talk in a meaningful way with other districts. And I just think that is a sea change. That is not something I've seen in this community before. And again, these initiatives are so big, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take everybody in the community agreeing that we have commonality in these and just really building on this communication. I think that's, one of the most important things coming out of this is that we have the opportunity to talk to Chief Saline. How do we support him and how does he support us? And we are both doing this to help our community be more safe and resilient and sustainable. So I think those are just really important lessons, and just good work, and keep the engagement, keep the ideas flowing in this group. I think it's going to overlap with all of the other groups. We're all going to have aspects of all of these initiatives overlap. So that's a good thing.
Ditto. Well said. I like
Yeah, I really appreciate as the facilitator that feedback. I mean, that gives me a clear idea of where I'm going, and what I'm hearing is, overall agreement with, the definitions and the overall scopes and goals we have today. I did summarize what I hear and heard today, and I'm going to feed that back to the board, and please give me input on that. But I heard a need to identify priorities and where the dollars are justified, and that came across a couple topic points. To identify areas of mutual benefit, and, to echo President Finn at the end, communicate and collaborate, because that's how you do that. Without, we won't know until we learn more about each other and share. And then the third one was to continue to refine the what and the why, and to echo Director Aguirre, kind of get into the financing at the end, but you can't really get to there unless you really understand what and why. And then the financing can then have a much broader set of opportunities or partners. How does that sound to the board?
That what everyone feels that summary was accurate for each of you?
Yes, Stephen, you captured my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, did you want to have comments about this particular task force and what you heard the board discussing?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to see, it's really exciting that the carrying forward with the community input and these task force is kind of materializing in great discussion with the board as we enter into these final workshops and final steps of the strategic planning process. One of the things I wanted to note, and this came to mind as we're going through this great discussion here, is that I've kind of failed to mention in the introductory process that while we've identified based on feedback and comments during our focus group, a couple of key community members or local leaders to participate in these. We're still going through the process. The board hasn't formally adopted or initiatives. And as we move forward and through that adoption process, it will be at the board's pleasure to kind of construct future task force or committees, and there'll be opportunities for other community members to participate. These initial ones were simply carrying forward the information collection process and really help us form these initiatives in the final steps. So great discussion, really, this was the intent. This was the goal here, is to solicit great discussion and carry this process forward. A great job.
So before we go to the next task force, this task force already has 2 more meetings set. The goal was 3 meetings before the 19th, and you can see the April 6th and 13th is when they're meeting. And if there's anything else you think of, please let Stephen know, what are other ideas, other issues you'd like to bring forward. And on the 19th, it's going to be exciting to see what this task force comes up with, where you are 2 more meetings later. So Well done. Next task force.
All right, thank you, Pam. I had the pleasure of participating in the next task force, so I'll give you the overview and then again ask for group discussion on this. So this task force was the one associated with community high-speed internet broadband. This was a very popular topic and had a lot of momentum coming out of the focus groups and the surveys. And so we established a task force with some of the community leaders and members that had expressed some interest during that original task force focus group process. The members for this one were Director Bender, Steve Frisch, who is the president of the Sierra Business Council, Deirdre Henderson, who is the founding member of the North Tahoe Citizens Climate Lobby, and has done some professional work in terms of economic development. We also had Ed Hilton, who's the IT director for the school district, and had obviously is a great stakeholder in internet resources. We had Judy Price, who is the town clerk and who has done work in her role with local services that are already existing in terms of communication and our internet services. And then I was the facilitator. A couple of the key points that were discussed, we started off with just an overall background of the community's challenges. These aren't recent challenges. They've existed for some time. They've been kind of the microscope is on them. They've been exacerbated to some extent with the recent COVID pandemic and the kind of enhanced need for things like work from home, school from home. So internet accessibility and capacity has always been an issue, but it's been increased of recent. We did a brief overview of the PUD's existing communication infrastructure. This is regarding the district's more than 60 miles of fiber optic trunk lines throughout the community. This infrastructure was constructed to provide communication with district facilities, but the concept has always been that there may be a potential use for community-wide service to piggyback on this investment. Additional discussions revolved around the importance of reliable communication infrastructure with respect to economic health of our community. There was a great, rich discussion on this. Most of our initial discussions in the focus groups were based on personal use, educational use. This discussion really evolved into what it means for local business, local, diverse economic health here in the community. Obviously, with the new paradigm of working from home and remote, the Zoomtown concept of Truckee was that there's an elevated need for reliable, high-capacity communication here in the community in order to continue to build on that economic health. The initial project scope that was identified by the group identified the level of broadband internet services the community requires to meet local needs, and then based on these needs, identify short and long-term solutions. The goals, the 3 to 6 month short-term goals for the task force would be to develop a scope of work for a feasibility study. This really centered around what's the most beneficial path to accomplish the goal. Is it use of our trunk line fiber? Is it incorporation of wireless endpoints? Is it complete fiber to the home? What are the options out there, including the emerging satellite technologies to accomplish this? And then identify options for potential organizational structure. And I'll call this project structure. This is really centered around, is this something the district would carry forward? Would it be a public-private partnership with existing ISP service providers? Would it be a new entity, a JPA, or some economic model that we haven't thought of yet? And then that dovetailed quickly into identifying funding opportunities. This task force group had a lot of firsthand experience with nonprofit, for-profit, and community-based fundraising capabilities. Topics like federal funding opportunities, state funding opportunities, local grants. investments from investor-owned service providers. There was a great discussion on just a whole range of opportunities, but what would be most beneficial for the success of this community and this project. And then finally, one of the key goals that kind of surfaced out of all this discussion was that there are a lot of great resources here in the communities, a lot of experience, a lot of great innovative minds, a lot of local resource expertise that we could tap into. And so one of the goals of this task force moving forward would be to identify those and how do we bring those into the mix and looking at the long-term strategic plan. So that discussion will carry on in the future meetings. Our next scheduled meeting is Thursday, April 8th. And again, like I mentioned before, these are initial task force meetings. Once the board fully adopts and develops the initiatives, the board will have the opportunity to direct staff on how to proceed from there. At this point, I'd really like to open it up to Director Bender and give some feedback and start the discussion with the board.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, we had a really good discussion. A lot of people are interested in this, so in bringing reliable communication to the area. They talked about, economic viability and diversification of the economy, and this could help be the backbone of doing that. Some funding opportunities that we talked about, having those other folks on the Zoom meeting was pretty informative. Steve Frisch here locally working on AB 34, a $10 billion broadband funding measure. So, that the state assembly is working on. So it's really interesting to hear that, how that will kind of trickle down potentially to how that could potentially come into our community and keeping him involved, and so we can stay on top of that funding. Brian touched on the other stakeholders and local resources. I mean, a lot of people have second and some people have third homes up here and more. So there's CEOs and other folks who have key information that they've done. They're a CEO of a company doing that stuff. They're here in this community who we can reach out to and provide support for this initiative. We talked a little bit about what Elon Musk is doing. So there's a lot of satellite technology coming on. So just keeping all that in mind as we move forward, like what does the future look like, and be thinking of the future. How do we not just design for and think about for now, but for the future, and making sure that it's scalable. And then of course, deciding public versus private and how that looks in those two first goals, the organizational structure and identifying that in the feasibility study. So a lot of great discussion. Looking forward to the next meeting to kind of wrap it up. So it's I guess put in the strategic plan, but a working document, as these initiatives grow and we learn more and figure out who our players will be and where the funding is going to come from. So excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Bender. President Finn, could you find out comments from your colleagues and questions and observations of what you heard? And things to take back for both Brian and Director Bender.
Yeah, I feel like this particular task force has a lot of potential for getting a lot done in a relatively short period of time. As Brian pointed out, this community, our real resource here is the people who live here. There's such a well of experience and expertise, and they are willing to put in their time and passion to bring, you know, modern communications to this town, which we do desperately need. I mean, this is a huge economic driver that the town of Truckee really needs. You know, we are, as you pointed out, COVID has played a role, and just how technology has evolved and how the workforce and the workplace has evolved. I think, I don't know if we've thought about, but some of this task force, I feel like it could spin off and leave the PUD's orbit in a certain way where we can support them instead of them supporting us. Like when you shift it a little bit and make it about how can this district best support this community. You know, we have this infrastructure, but we are, you know, could we be open to just sort, you know, other people's sort of plans and suggestions, and like, you know what, it doesn't have to how different levels that the PUD can operate in this on, and playing a supporting role instead of the driving role. You know, I think that's something that we don't do very often is ask for other districts or entities or even people, you know, hey, put together a do this and show us what the PUD's piece in it is. Does that make sense? I don't mean that. I just think that there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of knowledge here. There's a lot of expertise here. There's a decent chunk of infrastructure thanks to us. And if all of us can come together and get help with the money, the funding aspect, which I know is a large piece of the puzzle that is being very seriously addressed at the state level and hopefully soon at the federal level, I feel like this has the potential to boom, get done. And it's super exciting. And but to do that, I think we have to be open to just continue to open this door. Again, the communication and trust, and it's a two-way street. We can say, hey, we've been thinking about this, and really be receptive to, hey, here are solutions that are coming from our community that we can play a role in, but aren't necessarily the driver of. So anyway, I just go for it. Be imaginative and don't be afraid to trust our community and to have them trust us back. Good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Krista. I mean, I think you hit the point that, you know, I made quite some time ago, I think in a meeting with Jeff and Rem was, you know, what does this look like? You know, like, and I think it comes down to the first two, develop the scope and identify options for potential organizational structure. And I think that hits about what you're saying, Krista, is like, are we in the lead role or are we in a supporting role? And I think that's a really prudent question that because is going to need, you know, expertise outside of perhaps this organization, and like we said, leveraging some of the minds that are already in the community that know this stuff as to what is the right organizational structure. We know what the problem is, and we have infrastructure that can help solve the problem, but you know, how do we get to that end goal, and what's the most efficient way to do it that benefits the community and you know, and creates a streamlined, transparent process to get there. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to kind of continue to go down that road of, you know, the scope and the organizational structure. I think that's going to be key to the success of this this particular task force. So thanks for your input, Jeff and Brian. I appreciate it.
Other director comments?
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. So yeah, thank you guys for going through this. It is an intriguing thing, and I was happy to see all the names that were part of this task force, because they do, have an interest in all of this. And, if talking about the organization and how this looks, are we have a supporting role? Are we the primary role? Is it a business we're starting? That would be, spin off to a whole new utility. Or if it's just a supporting role, making sure that we have the internal staff in order to maintain the system as a demand of whoever our one, person, or, whoever we're supporting with it. So, that's, it's always some, thought with it. But it was interesting to hear about the different technology, that even once we put all the technology in, the technology changed the next day, and will it be outdated? And because this is such an ever-changing business, that's always good to have a consideration for that. So, but thanks, you guys. It's always good to hear, what the rest of the community has, and how the board members, listen to them, and what your thoughts are too. So thank you.
Director Aguirre, any thoughts on broadband and what you've heard?
Well, again, this looks like a good start.
Yeah, doesn't it?
These guys have been working hard on this stuff. I'm sitting here at home, and everybody else is working. And it looks like they narrowed it down to what we need to know. Level of broadband internet services the community requires. I mean, that's going to be a job and a half, and meet the needs based upon short and long-term solutions, and develop a scope of work for the feasibility study. I mean, we're into it. It seems like we're into it. I remember the first meeting we mentioned broadband, and and the money, and it's going to be so much money and all that. And we're narrowing it down to the start now. And like I said in my last comments, we're going to get to a point where the finances will start showing up, and we'll know what it's going to require. And so I think that you guys have done a beautiful job on this. So we'll wait for the April 8th meeting, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Brian, do you want to summarize what you've heard everyone say, and what, you'll get to Director Bender, and what their recommendations are for next steps? I heard some exciting ones.
Thank you. Yeah, this is really good, because it fits nicely into the discussion we had during the task force. And I think what I'm hearing from all of the board members is really a need moving forward to have a discussion and really explore who owns this project, who supports this project, how do we fund it. So continue to vet that out. And as we approach final adoption of the strategic plan, the board will have some good information on how to frame goals for staff. And so the comments are right in alignment with what we were discussing in the task force, and I'm excited to bring that back to the community members.
Did Brian cover the summary all right to all board members? Kind of a thumbs up. Or is there anything else? I see most thumbs up there, Brian.
All right, that's always good news.
So we're going to go through our next two task forces, and I'm wondering if you'd like to take a 10-minute break.
Absolutely.
I guess it's unanimous.
Okay. It is 5:23, so let's just say let's be back at 5:35.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone, President Finn?
Yes, that sounds perfect. Let's
Okay.
See you back at 5:35.
5:35.
Is it muted? There you go. Yeah.
Brian, could you go to the next slide?
I'll make it back.
Thank you. Is Tony back?
I don't see him yet.
There he is.
There he is. Pop up. There he is.
Tony, I don't know how you're doing this. I had 101.2 fever after my second shot for over 20 hours, and I couldn't have been on a Zoom. So kudos. Thank you.
You don't see my teeth chattering.
Okay. The shivering. You should have a big blanket, electric blanket. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to our third task force. This is 100% clean renewable, and that's nested under goal number 2, which is, of course, our environmental stewardship goal. And we have Joe Horvath, who was our facilitator. I'm going to turn this over to you, Joe.
Great. Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Brian. Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. The 100% Clean Renewable Task Force had their first meeting last Wednesday on March 24th. Our members included Director Finn, Vice Mayor Courtney Henderson, Deirdre Henderson, who is a community activist and member of 100% Renewable Truckee, and Ward Sproat. Ward had some internet issues and could not join us at our first meeting, but he is scheduled to be there at our next meeting. And then myself as facilitator. So to summarize our discussion, President Finn kicked off our discussion at that first meeting by commenting on this initiative from the board's perspective. That started a very lively discussion. We talked about the components needed to get to 100%, in addition to large-scale generation sources, which we're familiar with. We also talked about the distributed energy resources, including rooftop solar and batteries. We discussed the possibility of microgrids, both smaller and more community scale microgrids, and the need to identify other items too. And this segued into a discussion on education and having a series of educational workshops for community involvement. We could discuss the various technologies, their advantages and disadvantages. And next was a collaboration with other agencies. In addition to the community at large, we should also engage with other local agencies, including the town and special districts. How are they addressing their greenhouse gas emissions goals, and seek their input? We also discussed the need to frame the discussion in a positive way with the community. It should be a customer-centric discussion. And finally, we had a discussion on the topic of clean versus renewable. I made the proposal at the meeting to drop the word renewable from the name of our task force and keep only the word clean. And this was a bomb, I admit. I dropped this bomb. I dropped this bomb as a way to further discussion about where we want to go with this initiative. So some items, if I could summarize a bit of that discussion, some discussion points in favor of dropping the word renewable included the idea that the national landscape has already shifted terminology from renewable to clean energy. This is happening at the state level, the state and local government level. It's happening at climate change advocacy groups, and it's happening at the federal government level. For example, the Clean Future Act is currently making its way through Congress. This is part of the Biden administration's climate plan. It, of course, repeatedly, if you look at it, it repeatedly uses the phrase clean energy or zero emissions energy, and it also has strong support for nuclear power and small modular reactor technology in particular. Of course, I believe the reason for using clean energy is the enemy is climate change and its effects. And the answer, of course, is greenhouse gas reductions. And therefore, carbon-free energy technologies should be candidates for consideration. And also, the concept of clean energy had its origin, I believe, in California and other states with their state mandates. For instance, SB 100 has a mandate for 60% renewables and the remaining 40% to come from carbon-free sources. So I think the idea of clean energy is an umbrella term. And then on the other side, some discussion points in favor of keeping the word renewable included the idea that renewable is clearly a well-known word. It's a household term, if you will, and it carries a lot of weight. There's also a lot of positive history with renewable energy and the changes the district has made to our portfolio over the years to add renewables and to increase that in our portfolio. And there's also a lot of community momentum around the word renewable, thanks in no small part to the work of 100% Renewable Truckee and the work of Deirdre Henderson and her colleagues. And this word may help us also to respect the past, but still keep looking to the future. And then some general discussion items about this proposal, neither pro nor con, included the fact that we do need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And also, we should not rule out the possibility of nuclear power playing a role in our future, specifically perhaps UAMP's carbon-free power projects with this SMR technology, the small modular reactor technology. And so after our discussion, we arrived at the following 3 goals. And these are to continue to collaborate with key community partners, including the town, local agencies, and other stakeholders. Number 2, develop a series of community learning events to discuss, facilitate, and potentially propose the adoption of various energy solutions. And finally, propose a definition for the long-term 100% clean renewable goal and vision for the districts. Our next meeting is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, bright and early. And I know I've dropped a bomb on this initiative, and I'm happy to offer some additional perspectives that may be helpful to the board. But at this point, I'd like to turn the discussion over to President Finn. Thank you.
Thank you,
So,
Jeff.
President Finn, I cannot wait for you to describe what everyone's faces were like when Joe.
They were very graceful. they gracefully sidestepped Joe's bombs. Actually, we didn't sidestep. We talked about it. And that is the point. Like he's right. The goal here is greenhouse gas emissions reductions. This initiative, for one thing, it's well underway. The PUD is well down the road towards meeting its goals, and our goals and the state's goals and the town's goals, all of which are ultimately the same, but the timelines are different. So this is going on right now. And what Joe brought up about nuclear being an arrow in the quiver that's going to help us as a nation and as a world is, of course, very true. And this is coming from someone who spoke out against the small nuclear reactor, because for this community, that's a big leap. It's a big hunk to break down. And I still think for this community at this moment in time, it's not going to be, that brings us to the education component. That brings us again to communication and education. And the more we engage with this community and talk about the reality of where we're at with climate change, the more we're all going to understand that everything is on the table. So definitions are important. Language is important. Education is important. And we have, with Deirdre and Courtney, and I'm assuming Ward and myself, and just in general in this community, there is a lot of passion and commitment and dedication to helping solve this giant challenge in ways that I don't think are in any of the other initiatives, actually. You know, I don't think people get super passionate about broadband. They get very annoyed, absolutely. But as far as, you know, a lot of people consider this an existential crisis that we need to solve as quickly as possible. So again, education and communication with our community partners, and how can the other districts help us along this road and us help them. This is not going to happen with just the PUD. It can't. It's too big a lift for us to accomplish by ourselves. We need to be in alignment with our town and the other districts. The fire district certainly pops to mind, the airport district, all of them, the hospital district, all of them have a skin in the game with reducing greenhouse gases. And so those goals, you know, they seem super, I don't want to say amorphous. There are concrete goals. Continue to collaborate, to deepen the collaboration, to help all of us understand where our values and our goals align and overlap. And so we want to continue to have those conversations, to deepen those conversations, and then tie that to action, just like we're doing across the board with our strategic plan. It's one thing to have values. It's another thing to be able to tie them to actions, actionable things. And big part of that is education, and which was the next, you know, our goals. And I think those goals are in no particular order, just like our strategic plan goals they're equally weighted. They just had to be numbered to differentiate them. But proposing the definition, because that is, you know, one of the first things that we really have to do, and that's probably top of our list tomorrow, is reopen the clean, the renewable, you know. And I think part of that, the first time around, clean, people felt misled, because clean of carbon emissions, but nuclear carries a heavy political burden. You know, we all know that people are afraid of nuclear. We're afraid of nuclear waste. We don't have solutions for that. And I know a lot of us are hesitant to open up another technology that doesn't have, we don't know what to do with it in the end. You know, do we want to open up a thing that we have to clean up, and we don't have the science yet. And this whole, you know, again, this whole initiative, that is a challenge, period. This is one of the things, technology doesn't exist yet to get us where we need to go. So it's education, collaboration, and I think the input from the community is going to be real key. It's going to really drive us. We have to listen to them. That it's not, you know, we know what happens when we don't, or we don't fully engage, when we do things and then the town gets up in arms. We saw it the first time with the coal contract, whatever, 15, 20 years ago that was. And then we saw it again with the small nuclear, because we weren't listening and engaging as much as we have to. So anyway, the goals, I think they're incredibly important. We can't really move this meaningfully forward without deeper education, which will lead to more meaningful input by the community to really understand what it is we're talking to and talking about, and what, you know, a lot of times in our head, we have an idea of what's really dangerous or scary, and it doesn't actually fit with reality. Like, you need to do a real assessment of what are the real threats facing us right now, and which of these things deserve our attention and are a real legitimate and appropriate emotional response. And nuclear sort of falls in that category. You know, it makes us anxious and afraid. Maybe we shouldn't be. And that's what education is going to accomplish. Because I do agree with Joe that ultimately everything is going to have to be on the table to address the real current greenhouse gas emissions climate change challenge. But right now, we're still we're still talking, and I don't think this community is ready for that right now at this moment in time. But we are definitely ready to as quickly as we can, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and get to 100% renewable. So I'm sorry, I could talk for way too long on these things, and it's sticky, it's philosophical, it's hard science.
Passionate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a real sticky wicket, but I think we have people who are focused, who are committed, and who are going to help us, and we are going to help them back. And I think after tomorrow, we'll have more clarity.
Well, let's hear what your colleagues have to say, and comments and thoughts, because this is a very important topic. I know, Director Bender, are you just biting at the bit here?
Yeah, I have a thought and I don't want to lose it, and I'm trying to write it down. And so, thank you. So I like the point. We're talking about the small nuclear reactors. I had a lot invested in that project, and we ultimately unanimously decided not to do it. And then, it's just a state of how you're viewing it and what people are used to. We're used to dumping carbon in the ocean. We're used to dumping carbon into the atmosphere, and everybody's just okay with it because we've been doing it for so long. And it's not contained, right? And I think education is a key point of that. The waste product of all burning fossil fuels is the atmosphere, it's the ocean, and everybody's just used to doing that. And nuclear, yes, it can be scary, the nuclear waste and emergencies that are, I can't think of the word, but if there's a nuclear problem, reactor break, whatever, people are scared of that. But then if they can contain that, all that waste is contained. We're not polluting all the rest of the animals and living things on the earth. So, I think education is a key part. So I just wanted to get that out, that mindset, still be open, to nuclear and continue that conversation. It's nice to hear that people are listening, because there are other problems than just that 55-gallon barrel of wasted fuel rods that's contained on a site in lots of concrete, or you're just dumping enormous amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. Good thing I'm dropping the bomb, Joe. That's how you get people talking. Throw a grenade in the middle. And it looks like you're making some progress, and you're going to keep the word renewable in there. But then, if nuclear fits in, can you really call nuclear renewable? But I guess that's your goal, defining it. So I like it.
Director Bender, would there be something, really heard your comments. Is there something specific you would like Joe and Krista to take back to this task force tomorrow to really, catapult them to the next discussion level that is of interest to you?
Let me give you a moment.
Well, just what you said, I did capture that.
I think it's the definition, really defining it,
Yeah.
because once you define it, then nuclear is either in or out. And, we canned it, I don't know how many years ago, but,
if you think of something else, we'll go to other directors, but pop in with your thoughts, because this is such an important discussion for the community.
I would argue, Jeff, I think I hear Jeff loud and clear. I think the idea of the definition is probably more important than getting into specific technologies at this point in time. Will kind of be my take on it. I really feel like I'm really encouraged by this task force because I think it's finally developed a platform for the community and the district to come together and talk about these issues in a less formal environment, so that Joe can drop that bomb and really, and really just say, hey, let's, here's this bomb. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about why and what it means and what it means to the community. And, and I don't necessarily feel like changing the definition, is a guarantee that, we're going to bring in certain technologies. It's just an identification of the goal. And then from there, you can build upon what's right for the community to provide for resources moving forward. So I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing. I really think it's finally trying to bring a bunch of players in the room together to talk about these things, because I feel like, there's been a lot of separate paths going in this community, and they all haven't necessarily worked with each other, and all necessarily haven't really worked with us. And fortunately, fortunately for this community, we're here and we need to be part of that discussion. There's just no two ways around it. We are the experts. We are the ones who can evaluate and make sure that the decisions that are being made are the best decisions for this community. But bringing in this task force, I think, really will help solidify those relationships moving forward. So I'm encouraged to hear and see what's happening.
Fantastic. Director Harris, Director Aguera, comments?
Yeah, I like to see I liked the members that were present during the discussions. I think that it's obviously very important to have the 100% renewables truckee as part of it. And I do remember the board meeting where they proposed the small nuclear reactors and it not getting voted in due to if my memory serves me right, they didn't know what to do with the waste. And they didn't want to kick the can down to a future generation to figure out what to do with the waste. So I think as technologies are constantly changing, I was raised and went to a no nukes protest as a kid. So I understand and appreciate the no nukes side of things. And I also appreciate dropping bombs in the middle of meetings. So thank you, Joe, for doing that. Because it does spur good discussion, and it does get people, thinking. At first there may be a little defensiveness, but then as you sit and talk about it, then you can really kind of come to the table with everybody and come to a mutual and respectful path to take towards this 100% clean renewable goal. So I was happy to see that. Thank you.
Director Aguera, any comments?
Yes, I can see that this task force is might take a little bit longer in time to get these other agencies to get 100% educated. But I know you could do it. And we'll get 98%, I'm sure. And as far as renewables and clean energy, I think that people and agencies and so on are going to be they'll probably be using both terms. And because they're synonymous, they kind of come to the same point, and it's just what you're used to talking about at the office. If you say clean energy, you're going to use clean energy. And someone will say, no, I'm going to use renewable. Well, they'll use renewable. I think we'll hear both terms. I think, and in the future to come. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Director Aguera. And Joe, could you summarize what you've heard and what you'll take back tomorrow? And let's make sure we clarify with directors if there's anything else.
Sure. Thank you, Pam. I think perhaps President Finn said it the best, that this initiative is really well underway. The district, it's in alignment with our district goals, with state goals, and also with town goals with regards to GHG reduction. And that education is a key. Education and collaboration will help with the process of getting input from the community, and that's what we're seeking. So that's what I heard. That's what I heard the board say.
good.
Any other additions to that for Joe?
Yeah, I think the collaboration part, really big one. You know, when I think what Tony said is you know, we do supply all the power to the town. So you got to talk to us. So so when folks set goals, let's talk. And I think bringing in the town and with their goals and collaborating on that, I mean, we must do it or they must do it if they got to talk to us to reach it, and we're open to do that and help them make that happen as a community. So thank you.
These discussions are so important. We're running just a little bit behind schedule, but I want to go on to the next task force because this is all about your initiatives and these task forces where they go next and input. So this has been great discussion. Let's go on to the next task force, the local clean power, Brian, if we could. Okay, so local clean power generation, solar, hydro, or biomass, and this too is nested under goal number 2, which is our environmental stewardship. And Stephen, knowing we're running a little bit behind, but I know you had a great discussion here too. I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thank you. And I'll jump right into it. I had the privilege again of being on this task force. President Finn was there. Vice Mayor Courtney Henderson, Steve Frisch, the president of Sierra Business Council, and then Kevin Smith, the CEO, GM of the airport, was absent but will attend, and we've connected after, and he's still very committed to the task force. And then I was the facilitator. There are a lot of parallels to all 3 of the task force, so I'll go through this a little quicker this time. But, you know, security, reliability, and renewables. And again, there's that public safety and that electric system reliability, alignment with town, local opportunities for carbon capture, utility services and circuits that are the most critical, like undergrounding. You know, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck? You know, what are the emergency services or critical needs that we would want to address? The community need and how to address it, and you know, that public outreach. What is the community need, and you know, what's the best way to address it? And then you know, discussion of how did we get here? The historical evolution of Truckee's local agencies. And there was a point made that was poignant that, you know, when the 17 special districts were created, we all had pretty understandable missions: water, power, fire, garbage, sewer. But now we all have GHG, and we all have housing, and we have all these things that are overlapping. So, you know, how do we address that? So the initial project scope that was put together based on the discussion was pursue opportunities, including local clean generation for the TDPUD, to improve public safety, electric system reliability, and integrated public policy objectives. And like the undergrounding, that's a bigger issue than just undergrounding. Local clean generation's a bigger issue than just local power. And so those first 2, public safety and electric system reliability, are identical to undergrounding. And then the integrated public policy objectives is a rich discussion point for the board and for other boards in our community. And then the goals established were, again, to identify the key steps to define the initiative scope, initial timelines, and estimated costs. And we broke that down into public outreach, education, and community input, identify and define co-benefits, costs, and metrics for success, and identify and engage with partners, funders, and stakeholders. And again, similar themes. And the next two meetings listed there is where we'll develop that 3 to 6 month work plan and scope. And with that, I will pass it on to President Finn.
I'll be a lot faster because a lot of these we've already covered it. You know, it's the same takeaways: collaboration, education, community, two-way street, input. What are we really, what's the point of the clean local generation, or, you know, local renewable generation? See, Joe, you've already got me saying clean. It's like mission accomplished. Renewable local generation. But again, definitions, public education, identifying where we have overlap in our public policies, in our values, in our what we want to accomplish with safety, reliability, and renewables, greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So all the same themes here. And I think, Stephen, you did a great job of laying that out and pretty clear definition of our next steps. And this is another, I think it falls under the sort of broadband, in my mind, bucket of this is something the whole community is going to have to do. We will support it in whatever way we can, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be the drivers. You know, we're not going to build probably generation, but maybe we can commit to buy the electricity from it. So we'll see how these puzzle pieces fit together. And it's not just us, it's this community has this lift that we all have to come together to accomplish. So I'm going to sit back since we're short on time. And again, I can just blah, blah, blah. It's my specialty. I like to talk about these.
How about other director comments here for Krista and Stephen to take back tomorrow, or April 2nd, Friday? Director Bender, any thoughts?
You know, it's already happening with the town, and really the 2019 Energy Code mandated solar PV. And one of my guys is just cranking out quick solar analysis, and for a lot of the projects happening in this community. So when those houses are finished, there's going to be a really big, now that the Energy Code is here, the building department is, and this collaboration of local solar generation and of course the Energy Code, we're going to see a lot of solar PV here in town on buildings because it's mandatory. There are ways, you know, if you have trees and stuff, etc., you won't see it, but you know, just and then I'm still pretty excited about the biomass energy. You know, that's a win-win in multiple areas, and so just excited to really try and make that happen. And with the airport and the rest of the members of this task force, I think, you know, there's some really big potential there to make something happen with power purchases and local clean power generation. So exciting.
Other director comments?
I think that undertaking something this large, you know, obviously will be extra staffing and all that good kind of stuff, but I don't really have a lot else to contribute. I think Jeff and Krista and as well as Stephen, you know, put in their comments, and at this point, I'll just kind of go with that in interest of time.
Thank you.
Well, I'll say that the task force has set the pattern. Now all I got to do is keep going with it. I mean, they've got their goals set, initial project scope, and they know what to do with the key discussion points. So it's up to the task force now to carry it on and just get as much information to the public and feedback as we can and go from there. Thank you, Pam.
I'll just add real quick. I appreciate the perspective of Krista and other board members looking at this as at a broad level, that we may not be the ones who are actually building and operating the generation, but we may be the ones finding the solutions and supporting it and potentially purchasing it. Because a lot of these are just like undergrounding. These are big lifts, and we may not be the right organization to do 100% of it. So appreciate the broadening of the scope and the district's potential involvement in this particular goal.
Well, I
Great.
really appreciate all the feedback. And what's the problem or the challenge in the past with biomass is they want the electric utility to pay for 100% of it. But a lot of the benefits go to public safety and emergency response and keeping critical people and public safety and those issues that keep coming up. So how can we stack those benefits and bring the people together to pay for it? That's how to get it done. And that is a big lift and a big discussion, but one we're excited to happen. So what I heard here was, identifying overlapping interests and benefits and, stacking them in partners and communication. So, and similar to the other themes we've heard before. Is that accurate?
Anything else you want Stephen to add? I see thumbs up, Stephen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I want Brian to make some summary comments, but I believe in the history of the PUD, this is the first time you have solicited, first of all, you have established initiatives, you've solicited community input in prioritizing those initiatives, talking about them then in task forces and prioritizing them. And then you're following through with the general manager task forces to begin to talk about goals and scopes and get input. How are you feeling as a board about this?
I'll pipe up. I feel very, very pleased. I'm very happy with these discussions that are happening, the broadness of them, the people who are participating, from the community. I'm incredibly appreciative of the staff work that is going into this. They are really just going above and beyond my expectations for sure. It's just very impressive. This is a lot of work. It's a lot of thought. It's a lot of organization. It's a lot of time. And I really, really appreciate it. And you're right, I haven't seen this sort of really digging in, identifying goals, and then taking steps to achieve them. And, not just us, with the community. So I'm incredibly impressed. I'm incredibly satisfied, and I'm incredibly excited to see where this is going to take us. It's a start. It's a really good start. So thank you all. And my fellow board members who, again, they have fevers, they're showing up, it's a lot of work. This is a lot of work. It's more than we've ever done before.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a lot of work, but it takes time and thought to do big things and accomplish stuff like this. So and keeping an open mind and bringing other folks in to help out. We don't have to do it on our own. So really appreciate all that work, and I think the big theme with everything is really collaboration, working with partners, and that's a big step in the right direction. So super excited to see all this, appreciate the work, and and we'll keep going.
Any other
Well, I'll tell you,
comments?
with these task force, the way they're working, we have kicked it off. I mean, we have started the game. So I think it's just gathering information and putting it all together and go from here. Thank you.
Brian, comments about this from your perspective and staff's perspective? Brian, are you there? Where are you?
I bet he's muted.
No, he's frozen. He's not blinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh no. Brian? Well, we'll
just
keep
got a
moving
text
on.
From Brian, just give him a couple minutes for him to restart.
Okay. We'll definitely hear his thoughts at the end of these task forces. But something I wanted to share with you is
Pam,
my
sorry,
perspective.
sorry for interrupting. Brian just stuck his head out to say that his computer froze and he'll restart and rejoin in just a second.
Thank you. From my perspective, you know, if you look at the role the PUD has played in the community over the last 25 years, and each of you would describe that as, you know, elected officials, this is such an opportune time as these evolve over time and the way you want them to. Oh my. Okay then. Brian, are you there?
I bet he's restarting.
Probably.
He had the slideshow, so he's.
But that's okay. I have the slideshow too, so I can always bring it up. I'm sure this is very frustrating for him. Sure is when it happens to me. But anyway, what I was going to say, just think about how people are viewing you now. You know, whether it's the airport or other districts and the town, this collaboration with community leaders. And it allows you as a board the ability to decide what is your role going to be moving forward in this community. Is it a safe haven where you facilitate all sorts of things? Is it trusted advisors? You know, many other entities choose to take that role as boards and elected officials or city councils. And it's just amazing the talk that's going on about these initiatives around town. Oh, have you heard about this? And, you know, these people are meeting, and it's a level of excitement. So I think I'm going to screen share here. Any news, Shauna, about Brian or Regina?
Not yet, I'm calling. He should be joining in.
Broadband.
Yeah, the broadband. There he is.
My apologies. My Zoom completely froze. I could hear you guys, but I couldn't see anything or control anything.
Do you want me to bring up the PowerPoint, Brian? Do you have it?
I still have it. I'll bring it up right now.
Okay. So I'm really excited to hear about these next task force meetings. And so now we're going to move right into the cash cow, and Kim will get to have a good discussion. Your comments are not foreign to me, and I'm very pleased you brought them up, because people get confused about these animals that are used on this model. So I want to really begin, remember that tonight, the next two segments that you're going to participate in is all about application. What you as a board can expect from staff to continue to use as tools to, let's say, inspect their expectations of capital projects, of these initiatives, of re-engineering processes and systems. So, do you have it, Brian?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Okie dokie.
Get us caught up here. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulty that ties into our one of our task force groups on community broadband.
It does. Okay, go to the next slide, would you please?
Here we go.
Okay, so I just want to review the cash cow model because I'm sorry if there were people who misunderstood the intention. So I'd like to go through each of the quadrants and explain how we're going to apply them tonight, how staff will continue to apply them in the future. So remember, you start with a bright idea. And Brian's going to explain why the initiatives are listed where they are in just a moment. But I just want to explain the model. So this was developed, as I told you at the last workshop, to really be a tool to have entities, both government and private entities, be able to analyze processes, systems, improvements, and bright ideas. So governments often, let's say, criticized from being afraid of change. And you've all heard that. And so the government entities that use this, use it as a tool with staff and with boards, elected officials, to make sure that they are really focused on where the revenue streams are coming into their entity and that they value them and that they're continuing to grow them. So a bright idea means high potential, low economic value, no money, and low impact to the organization or the community. The shining star has rising economic value. It also has high potential and rising impact. There's an interest, or it's already been started. And the cash cow is for the highest revenue streams. So, for example, for cities, what's really difficult, we had our ratepayers, but cities, their revenue streams are what? Taxes, fees, as you know, lots of time property or real estate. And what we want to do with our revenue streams, if we look at the highest impact and the highest economic value, is to make sure that we are taking care of those revenue streams, that we're respecting them, that in our decision making, your decision making as elected officials, you always say, and you guys are great about this, you know, this is the ratepayers' money. This is the taxpayers' money. So this is how you run your organization. And it just happens that the developers, and of course this This was developed in the 80s, is still used, is still valued in government and private industry. It is called the cash cow model. So whether we'd love to change that cute little cow there or not, no, the impact is not anything negative. But I did want to explain what the cash cow really means as far as revenue streams and the highest impact or funding. So let's say you heard tonight, yay, yay, we got a $300,000 grant. That's funding. Would that go into the cash cow, or would that be put under a bright idea? Those are the discussions staff would have. And then the low potential, low economic value, lowest impact is our cute little doggy here, because these are the things that government doesn't do well. These are processes and systems that people want to see reinvented. And very few government entities take the initiative to identify and say, you know, contractors are really upset and developers about timing for towns. And that's every town or every city in California, I promise you, I bet. At least all the ones I work with. And it's very hard to reinvent some of those processes and systems. But the community likes to see that you have things as a government entity that you're identifying that need to be, let's say, either we don't need this anymore, or we need a totally new system or process. It has low economic value, but low impact. And let's reinvent it and move it to a light bulb, or just say, this is irrelevant to what we're doing in this community. So Brian is going to take you through what staff has done with your initiatives, and then talk a little bit about why the automated metering system would be an example of a high value cash cow.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, so the application here for the district, clearly we're a not-for-profit agency, we're a public agency, we're stewards of public funds and community value. And so the cash cow in this application and all these applications is, what value does an initiative or a project or an idea bring to our ratepayers? If it doesn't have value, measurable value, then we need to make a decision as an agency. And so currently the discussion we're having this evening is with respect to the board identified initiatives that we are planning to incorporate into our strategic plan over the next 2, 5, 10 years, however long the strategic plan continues to evolve. And so we look at that, for example, on this model, utility undergrounding, community broadband, and local clean power generation. These initiatives specifically haven't been adopted or put into play in the past, or if they were put in play in the past, the life cycle ended on them. And so the board has identified these as potential initiatives for staff to pursue. And so currently, each of these are high potential. Currently, they provide no value to the community because they haven't been implemented. And so they're bright ideas that the board potentially at the adoption of this strategic plan will direct staff to pursue and see where they end up on this model. If we begin to invest in them and have tangible results and continue to develop each of these ideas, they'll move over and shift over to the high potential stars, rising stars, and then subsequently, you know, through full development and implementation, perhaps they'll make it to the cash cow quadrant, or the district or the community might decide, based on emerging technology or lack of funding or just new ideas, to move this back into the dog, and it needs to be reinvented or just forgotten about. On the other side, we have 100% clean renewable energy. As Director Finn and some of the other board of directors have identified this evening, this is already in play. It's an initiative that the board is bringing new life to, but it's already in play in terms of district's goals and initiatives to continue to develop our share of 100% clean renewable in our purchase market portfolio. and we've done tremendous work. It's been noted, 62%, 65%, potentially 75% in the next year or so. So this is a project or an idea or an initiative that has investment in it already. It has economic value to this community. It has environmental value to this community. And so it's continuing to rise. Where it ends up in the future, this discussion we had earlier really dictates that. And we're looking forward to what that really ends up looking like. An example that the board has recently been involved with in terms of a cash cow is, if you recall, last summer, we had some discussions in an actual board item regarding continued investment in our existing water system automated metering. And staff presented to the board that we were faced with some really challenging hurdles here with premature dying of batteries. And the district and this community has really heavily invested in this system. And so the board, with staff's support and providing information, arrived at a decision that it had value to reinvest in it and keep it in the cash cow quadrant, as opposed to moving on to a different technology or a different idea. So a lot of this we kind of do intuitively, but this model really helps us, as Pam pointed out, not allow an investment of the district or an idea of the district reside in the cash cow quadrant without providing further economic or some other value, whether it's environmental, quality of life, all the things that we provide through our services. And so this evening, I also want to have staff have a few items that we can run through this model that really give it more perspective. And, again, showing that we're looking for overall value to our ratepayers, not necessarily an item that generates revenue. So the first one I have this evening, I'm going to ask Joe Horvath, our electric utility director, to go through one of the projects he has with his staff through this model. Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Appreciate that introduction. Tonight, I'm going to go through the wildfire mitigation plan. And you'll notice that I have something in every quadrant. What I'd like to do is follow one item through in a discussion, and then I'll come back and talk about the strategies. So I want you to ignore for a moment strategy X and Y, and we'll just concentrate on the abbreviation for Wildfire Mitigation Plan, WMP. And let's walk through the model. And of course, we'll be going through the model counterclockwise. So Wildfire Mitigation Plan, what is it? Well, at its heart, it's a state requirement to mitigate the threat of wildfire caused by district electric facilities to increase our resiliency. Now, the Wildfire Mitigation Plan is the state's bright idea. And so it has to become our bright idea too, so to speak, because we need to implement it in some way. So we take that bright idea, we've moved it to the rising star. So if we go left to the rising star quadrant, so the district really developed a plan and implemented several specific strategies, two of which I'll be talking about more, with, of course, board approval. Now, I want to point out at this moment that the district has been already been performing quote unquote wildfire mitigation activities, but not under a formal wildfire mitigation plans. For example, we've been doing tree trimming. We have been doing other items within our extensive tree trimming, and we've been doing other items to protect against our facilities causing a wildfire. But the wildfire mitigation plan was a chance for us to formalize those and also to look at several specific strategies, two of which I'll talk about. So, and just in terms of the wildfire mitigation plan overall, the WMP, it goes right down into the cash cow because it directly contributes to our mission to provide safe and reliable electric service. And so again, the cash cow is a metaphor for a mature system with a high value, high economic value and high impact. And the economic value here in this case is preventing catastrophic loss to our community and to our system. That is the economic value. So let's take two. So I said that the wildfire mitigation plan is composed of several strategies. So I'd like to talk about strategy X next as we move through this model. So strategy X was this is one item within our wildfire mitigation plan that we considered. Strategy X, we had many strategies. The reason I said strategy X and Y was I didn't want to confine it to a number. We haven't numbered our system, so I used X and Y for convenience. So strategy X was, there's a concept out there, other utilities are doing it. It's what's called covered conductors. And of course, our overhead system is composed of bare wires. And bare wires have the probability of igniting a fire when a tree comes into contact with that bare wire. So strategy X, this covered conductor item, it has high potential. So we moved it into the Rising Star. We applied some staff resources. We looked at this strategy and we investigated it, costed it out. And it turns out that this strategy, because of the additional weight of the covering on the conductor, would have required a complete rebuild of our system due to that increased weight. In other words, the cost was very high. At this point, strategy X goes right into the dog. It goes right into the dog quadrant. And this is, at this point, the cost is too high. It's of limited use to the district. And I just want to point out that that as we placed it into the dog, we're recognizing that we are saving the district and their district ratepayers money at this point because this is too expensive. But the failure of this strategy leads to the bright idea for strategy Y. In other words, we're reinventing it. We're doing something different. We're thinking outside of the box, as it were. So strategy Y, I'll call it, has to do with fuses. We have fuses in our system that are called expulsion fuses. Expulsion fuses meaning when they operate, the way that they operate is they spit out, so to speak, hot gas and molten bits of metal, parts of the fuse link, as they operate. Expulsion fuses have been around for 100 years, since the start of electric utilities. They're a proven product. However, it's never happened in Truckee, but they have the potential when they expel gases to start fires. So there's another type of fuse. It's called an energy limiting fuse or current limiting fuses that's completely sealed. When it operates, it doesn't do that. So our bright idea in strategy Y was, why not replace our expulsion fuses with these other fuses? So as we move it to the Rising Star category, we also applied staff resources to this. We investigated it, costed it out, and we found that these fuses actually cost more than the expulsion fuses by quite a bit. However, we have only so many fuses in our system, and the cost to replace our expulsion fuses with these fuses are manageable. So staff came up with a 3-year plan to replace these fuses with the current limiting fuses or energy limiting fuses. And the board adopted that. The board agreed that was good. We've started the process. We're 1 year into that process. And so strategy Y, the current limiting fuses, drops right into the cash cow, so to speak, because it directly contributes to our mission of providing reliable and safe electric service. Again, strategy Y has the high economic value is in the fact that it prevents the catastrophic loss of both property and people during a wildfire, and contributes to our mission of the district to provide safe and reliable service. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, so much. So that's an example of a system or process, and love the way this was reinvented. Let's go right on, since I'm really a little nervous about time. Brian?
We have a second example. Mike Salmon, our CFO, will go through on a future opportunity. Joe's was kind of framed with an existing idea. Mike has one that kind of goes through the future potential. Mike.
Thank you, Brian, President Finn, and members of the board. I'll ratchet through this. As Joe was talking, a lot of these things cycle through in various stages of life. I'll start in the upper right quadrant. It's new to the district. We're shooting for a comprehensive annual financial report and a popular annual financial report for financial transparency to continue that effort. So that'll be coming out in this summer. The debt, taking on debt is not a new idea, but it is a new idea for the electric utility as far as related to potentially some of these initiatives that are being discussed. The phones are not new, as we all know, but the new concept here is we don't have call recording. Good call trees, good call management, call metrics is very limited here at the district. Things like automated caller ID to immediately pull up a customer tied to our customer information system. So those are some things that we're exploring aggressively to get going. And moving on to the next quadrant, Customer Service 2.0 was initiated in June, July of 2020, and now maturing that process to take that to the next level, in particular online applications. Moving to the next quadrant in our cash cow quadrant is our current legacy system called NISC, ABS, and CIS, Customer Information System. So it's been around here at the district quite a while. It's quite powerful. It has evolved over time, but assessing that is in progress now as to whether it's moving toward the DOG process or we just need to capitalize on its opportunities that are provided in that system, or do we need a whole new ERP system? In the DOG quadrant, squarely is our work order process for new construction and other processes that touch the work order process itself. It needs a complete overhaul, and that's a big initiative this summer to get going on that, to automate that process and make it more customer friendly, as more efficient for staff to process, but the end benefit is for the customer. So, phones right now, as they exist, are in the DOG, but the new idea that we want to pursue is to take it to, instead of being stuck at about 1982, to get to about 2010, 2015, to improve our customer service there.
Mike, did you want to talk any more about chart of accounts?
Sure. The chart of accounts is a beast here at the district. It's evolved over time. It has its basis in FERC and utility chart of accounts, which is great. But at the same time, it makes it fairly complex to provide management reports that are effective for understanding what the flow of the business is. And so I'm working with a couple of cohorts in the utility industry, as well as our auditors, to understand how we can evolve our chart of accounts, either still do the FERC accounting, but perhaps that's a secondary, for the times you need it at a tax level type of process, as opposed to, and make the management side of the chart of accounts more front and center. And will help with our financial reporting, particularly internal, and to the board.
Thanks, Mike. Before Brian has some comments, I just wanted to say we wanted to show you, remember, this is, inspecting expectations. And so using this tool is going to be something that's really important moving forward for the district. And I hope you enjoyed the applications, because they're both very different. Are there any comments from any board members?
I just want to pipe up and say I'm really glad to see that the work order process is now in the doghouse. I know the auditors, it's been a big bugbear for us.
The auditors will bring it up again.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an example, President Finn, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, that staff identifies and knows what, you know, needs to be reinvented, and there's transparency and everyone's working on it. It's a positive thing. So thank you for that comment. Brian, any other comments from you?
Yeah, great comments. This example here and the one that Joe provided really kind of demonstrates or illustrates that there are various triggers that will send a project, a concept, an idea, or initiative to various quadrants. And it may be, you know, change in technology. It might be just life cycle expiration or changing needs of the community. Clearly, the last about the last year with COVID, there are a lot of agencies using this model, whether they realize it or not, to really reevaluate, reassess how we do things, because in many aspects the paradigm shifted and we need to address that to continue to provide that quality service. So look forward to presenting future projects in this model for the board's consideration and evaluation.
The next portion is a review that Mike Salmon's going to just revisit, and they're just 4 slides, but it's for you with your task forces, just to remember some of the advice Mike gave all of us at the last workshop. So Mike, will you go through these for us?
Sure. So for really just to start off, you know, for all of these initiatives, the 4 initiatives that we went through earlier today, you know, right now they're in a collaboration, exploratory, fact-finding, you know, game plan standpoint. So there's really nothing in stone as far as quantifying the financial impacts to the district or the community yet. Those will flesh out, and as they do, we will gain on that and be able to put pencil to paper as far as the financial impacts. I covered last month's workshop. I covered this in detail. The undergrounding of power lines and exploratory, forgotten the term that was used earlier, but a feasibility study. Those type things are likely to not fall in the area of capitalization, so that means it'll be an operating expense if it's at least the portion that's a cost to the district. And these all of these type things are not currently in our budget, and so it's important to understand the financial impacts thereafter. Let's see.
You want me to go to the next slide?
Of course, for all of these initiatives, we will be potentially exploring local, regional, state, federal grant funds for potential cost sharing. Yes, please, Brian. Fiber build out, as you know, we have a good portion of the district already with fiber run. It is not complete, so that needs to be prioritized, and I believe it is in the capital plan for the next few years to gain momentum to complete the fiber backbone throughout the district's network. If the district itself took on the feasibility study, the portion that would be the district's cost would be probably more than likely be an operating expense in the year incurred. So that's important, you know, not a capital expense spread over time. If we did, you know, one of the areas that we need to understand on broadband is if we're in that, are we at a wholesale level or a retail direct to customer level? Particularly if we're at a retail level, I certainly, and in several broadband rural utility broadband seminars that I participate on Zoom, they clearly separate that entity. Its customer service, its engineers, its capital costs are all in a separate division. Right now we have electric and water. We would add one for fiber, for broadband service if we went the retail direction. Is it on this side? It depends on local clean generation, how that plays out. Certainly, exploratory type costs would be expense, and actual plant and engineering would be a capital expense. This is potentially very large dollars and could be a capital project once it, shovels are in the dirt. Okay. And then on, excuse me, on 100% clean, the purchase power cost is right at 13 million. And depending on, how the country, both California and the entire country heads toward clean energy, the likelihood of being, crazy expensive, it becomes less and less. And you're already seeing solar becoming much more affordable. So it's hard to know exactly where this is going to land, but just for a stake in the ground as far as quantifying cost, a 5% increase in our costs would be $645,000. So those were some keynotes on that. As far as budget goes for 21 and 20, for 22 and 23, it's likely that we don't know exactly what we need to have in the budget, but I would suggest that we have some funds as a placeholder for strategic initiatives. And then we don't have the conversation of, well, we don't have any money, what do we do next? So trying our best to work those drivers into a balanced budget will be a big part of our budget process that's fast approaching once we wrap up the 2020 audit. To the extent there's not something budgeted, the board does have discretion to make decisions and do things that are out of budget. That happens at every company, both government and non-government, and we just have to quantify its impacts and how we're going to fund it going forward.
That's great, Mike. Thank you. So as you're thinking about these discussions in your task forces, the other community members really don't have this in their back pocket. So it's a good thing to discuss. We need to move right on to the next topic. And just a reminder, I'm really excited for Brian to present this to you. Strategic planning is all about collaboration, transparency, and accountability. And tonight we're showing you the accountability portion. And Monday.com is a fantastic tool that I introduced the executive leadership team last year at an offsite. And Brian just picked up and started running with it. And Brian, I'm turning it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go through this relatively quickly, but I just kind of want to preface it by saying we'll have more involvement on this, more exposure to it as we move forward in the coming months. Obviously, there are a lot of project management, engineering management tools out there that we could have utilized. And so what the executive leadership identified or quickly noticed with Monday.com is its ease of use, accessibility, and kind of simplicity that we could real quickly collaborate, provide information in terms of transparency and accountability to both each other and staff across the district. And so the exciting new part is, as we take on these new initiatives and this new strategic plan, staff will be presenting to the board through this app where we are, what the status is of a particular initiative or a particular work group. And so I just wanted to provide a quick overview. I know we're running short on time, but it just a walkthrough of what this will look like moving forward in the future. And wanted to get board input on kind of the feedback on it. So quickly, I wanted to show each staff member has access to this app across the district, or will have in the very near future. And with your login, you have different editing rights and different accessibilities. But in terms of overall transparency, everyone can see what's going on at any given time. And with respect to the board, we'll have our own dashboard here with reference to strategic planning and initiatives. So you can see we've outlined community broadband, utility undergrounding, 100% clean renewable, and clean local generation. Each of these job boards has a status, it has an owner, it has subscriptions of who actually contributes to it, its status, its current status. We can break out subtopics. So we discussed this evening that the initial meetings for the task force have occurred last week, and we're reporting out that this meeting's been done. We can quickly present to the board what the agenda is for the next meeting. And as these initiatives get adopted, staff can present items at the board's request or something the staff wants to agendize to give updates in status. We can incorporate PowerPoints. We can incorporate budgets. We can incorporate community engagement. We can give access to stakeholders who have a particular role in the project. And so it's a very user-friendly, kind of high-level 30,000-foot app that allows us to quickly give an at-glance view of where everything's at. And just to give a little bit more background, staff across the district have already adopted and utilized this app. I want to give an example real quickly with the electric department's collaboration with the water utility in its water SCADA project. And so they've already been utilizing this, as you can see, quite robustly with all of their milestones and phases of water utility SCADA upgrades, its replacement project. And so in the future, we can quickly bring out visuals for the board or teams within the district to see where we're at with something. The other really unique opportunity here is that in terms of transparency and accountability, we can quickly see what activity has happened on a particular task. And so it outlines who's provided updates, when those were. And if you have a particular interest in this project, now you can go meet with the individual or the team member and find out what the status is. You can quickly see who's viewed it. And so we see transparency that staff has already engaged in the board strategic planning process across all levels. So we're really excited about this. It kind of steps up the communication throughout the district with the board, and then hopefully in the future with the community and the stakeholders. I'm open
Brian,
to
could you bring up the an example of something that's difficult?
I don't have that.
You don't have that right there. I was thinking maybe SCADA had something. But what's really exciting for you, for the board to see, is that the general manager is using this as a tool throughout the district. There's absolute transparency and accountability with projects. And if there's something that is out of sync or off task or off timeline, instead of using Microsoft Project that is so cumbersome, this is so easy to go in and say, who do I need to be supporting today? You know, who's off budget for Mike? It's really great. Comments? What do you think? Jeff, you use this stuff. Tony?
Yeah, we use Asana, which is
Okay,
very similar
yeah.
process. So
Good.
I
Jeff?
have a very crazy looking Microsoft Excel spreadsheet for mine scheduling.
Oh, geez.
So it was better than what we had before. Nothing, but this looks pretty sweet. Big projects, you can track a lot of stuff. So nice to see the organization, the flow, workload, and then you can switch to probably a Gantt chart mode. you know, how overworked and overbooked am I? So, yeah, a lot of cool features in there, so I like it.
Appreciate the feedback. It in the future can also be utilized to, when a project meets a milestone, it automatically alarms another stakeholder or participant that we're waiting for that individual's associated contribution. So we can implement alarming notifications. It's really kind of the world is your oyster on what we can do with it.
Any other comments? Okay, let's move right on, Brian. We have one more thing for this evening, and we'll be very fast. It's the environmental social governance model. And this is really a self-regulating, we've presented this to you several times, business model that measures sustainability and societal impact of the district, your clients, and the communities. And I'm going to let Brian explain when he saw this why he was so excited about it.
Yeah, thank you. So initially, when we took a look at this and it was presented to us, the title was Environmental Social Responsibility Model. And we looked at what folks regionally or nationally are doing with this, and saw some updates to it that took out the responsibility and added governance. And that governance tends to be a little bit of a scary word, but let me kind of explain our approach to this. Is that responsibility is something you should do. Governance basically suggests that it's implemented in how we make decisions. And it's not something we just should do, but it's something we plan on incorporating on how we make decisions in the future as a district, as a public agency. So what's really exciting about this is if we really think about it holistically and step back, this is already what we do. All of you do every day as an elected official for a public agency. You're purveyors, stewards of community interests, community funds, sustainability, environmental impacts. All of the things you just had discussions about this evening are built into this model. And so as we continue to live our strategic plan and use it as a guidance moving forward, and it's going to adapt at time, it's going to have recommended changes. Maybe the board decides we need to evaluate whether we continue to pursue an initiative and we adopt a new one. Going through this model, we can clearly see that all the components of that decision making are there. Is it addressing our community social responsibility? Is it including things like diversity, economic viability, overall benefit to the community? Resources, are there available resources, sufficient resources? What do those resources look like? Does it fit into our long-term goals as a district? Does it meet all of the levers and pillars of our strategic planning process? Does it have long-term viability? And does it meet all of our values, the ethics? And so this model seems, after we examine it, very simplistic, but it's a reminder visually as we make decisions as a staff and as a board moving forward, do our future decision-making opportunities satisfy all of these components? And I really was kind of gravitated towards this model because as public servants, this already is something we do, at least we strive to the best of our ability. And I'm really excited about moving forward with a strategic plan. This board, the board that sits before us right now, is fully engaged in adopting a strategic plan moving forward. And now we have guideposts to work within, and this model keeps us there. And continue to look for this being presented along with Monday.com and the cash cow model as the board receives recommendations from staff and has to make some very difficult decisions in the future. We have some tools to work with. And couple that with the community engagement that you all have kicked off over the last 6 months to a year, and we're going to continue to build on. I think we have a great recipe, a combination here for tremendous success of the district and kind of our new pivot moving forward. So really excited about it. Mike Salmon talked earlier about the budget and how it relates with the strategic initiatives, the key initiatives. And so we will continue that discussion. And part of that incorporating this model in addition to our budget approach. We use that ESG model to help guide how we fund and allocate funds. Again, these are community ratepayer funds, but we need to start thinking in terms of these buckets, so to speak, of environmental sustainability, the renewable clean energy, the community, broadband, undergrounding of utilities, the responsibility, diversity of economic health. All of those things fit into each of these little buckets. In past, we haven't budgeted in those terms. And so staff will be presenting in the future as we develop the next budget cycle, thinking in these terms and looking for board's feedback and direction. So something we're really excited about. I don't want to take too much more time. We're 3 hours into this workshop, but Pam, do we have any? First, I want to just ask for board feedback or comments and then kind of wrap this up.
I'm going to just pipe right up. I really like it. I just think that that's what we need to do. We need to shift our thinking to these sorts of terms instead of just inputs and outlays or projects, but where all these overlap and where we have to put our money where our mouth is. And I think this is a good way to look at that and to think about it and to take steps to actually make it real. So I look forward to more discussion on this. Obviously, it's not going to happen tonight, but I really want to explore more thoroughly this concept. Thank you.
Good. Other comments?
I like. Oh, go ahead.
Jeff. No, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, great. Just, organized thinking processes here, using what's been seen to work in with other districts and in the other industries, and just putting it all together, going through the processes here to establish our goals, align resources like you're saying, and the Monday.com stuff and just taking it to another level of organization, thinking, and when you do that, you accomplish more things. So in a shorter amount of time with potentially less money than just floundering around. So really I like seeing the organization, the thought going into this. So we have a clear plan moving forward and always, keeping an open mind. So love it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Any other
Director.
comments?
Yeah, no, I just echo what Jeff and Chris have said. I mean, I like to look at that cash cow model, which I don't like that term too much, but as a strategic planning, because in its essence, it's a strategic planning value tool.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with how we spend money, because that ultimately gets flushed out twice, every other year with budget and all the other transparent budget issues and spending issues that we go through. But what it really means is, here are these ideas that either spurned from staff or strategic plan or whatever, and here's how we view them in a value perspective and a tool. So just keep that in mind as we further these discussions and keep using that model.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments?
Yes, as an economics major, I've studied, I've exhausted the cash cow model, and I appreciate how you're applying it to the PUD and trying to look at like the cost benefits of it and of the projects that we're doing. So, always looking forward to what the next step is, and keeping costs in mind, because that's what we do, and also for the benefit of the community.
Thank you so much. So last slide, Brian, if you could. So next month, can you believe it? I can't believe where this 6 months has gone. We're really excited because we've been holding meetings meetings with all employees, listing our values, and employees have been taking each value and saying, what's the behavior we want to hold ourselves and each other accountable to? So what are the behaviors that at the PUD we mean by integrity, accountability, communication, safety, etc.? So that's data is going to be presented to you next week, as well as more staff development planning for the future. And then we're going to show you goals with projects, capital projects that are listed with numbers by departments. And so when there are board presentations, it will be goal number 1, electric capital project 1, 2, 3. You'll see the system and it will really be helpful. And we'll have more discussion with you about the goals and initiatives. And of course, we can't wait to hear the updates on your task forces and more discussion and input. Then May 19th, you will have an actual written strategic plan, and we will ask you to adopt that plan as well as the goals. So that's next steps. President Finn, it's all yours. Sorry, we're a little bit over.
It's mostly my fault, so I apologize for that. I can talk about these things. That was a really informative, deep, extensive workshop. I really appreciate everybody's input, the board, staff, the work you've put into it, and Brian helping us to see all the different ways that you guys are keeping tabs on all of this, keeping all of this moving, keeping all of these balls in the air. And it's really impressive. And I'm really grateful to everybody here for moving this district forward. So thank you. And I think we've likely had it for tonight.
Move to adjourn.
Tony needs to sleep.
Yes, Tony, you need to go to bed.
Yeah. So again, I really value all of you. I appreciate your input and your abilities and your dedication. And we will see you next week. Have a great night.
You too. Go Bruins.
It's adjourned. Okay.